A young couple's love was tested by betrayal, heartbreak, and an unexpected pregnancy. They had built their world on a foundation of faith, trusting in God and Mother Mary through everything. But when distance crept in and a sinister lie took root, that world shattered into a million pieces. Just when all hope was gone, when the future seemed irrevocably broken, something divine happened. A miracle so powerful, it changed their destiny forever. This is the story of Susan and Tom. Stay with me, because what Mother Mary revealed to this couple in their darkest moment will leave you speechless. It all started during their sophomore year at Lincoln University. Susan, with her keen intellect and a heart that wore its emotions on its sleeve, was majoring in business management. Tom, quieter, more introspective, with a steady and reliable presence, was studying engineering. Their paths might never have crossed were it not for Professor Davies' interdisciplinary project, the physics of structural integrity in business models. It was a mouthful, and it forced students from different faculties to collaborate. Susan walked into the assigned lab room, her arms full of textbooks, and found Tom already there, meticulously arranging prototypes of small bridges made from balsa wood. He looked up, offered a shy smile, and simply said, "I thought we should start with the tangible stuff. The physics part." Susan laughed, a sound that seemed to light up the sterile room. "And I brought the business models. I guess between your bridges and my spreadsheets, we might actually have a shot at this." And that's how it began. Late nights in the library, fueled by cheap coffee and shared ambition, they discovered a rhythm together. Tom's methodical, patient approach balanced Susan's energetic, big-picture thinking. He would carefully explain the load-bearing stress of a beam, and she would translate it into a metaphor for financial risk. They weren't just completing a project, they were building a language only the two of them understood. The day they presented their project, earning an A+ and praise from the professor, they celebrated not with a wild party, but with a quiet walk to the campus chapel. It was Tom who suggested it. "I'd like to say a quick thank you," he said, almost apologetically. Susan's face softened. "Me too." Inside the quiet, incense-scented space, they discovered their deepest common ground. Both came from families where faith was a cornerstone. Both held a special devotion to Mother Mary. Susan had a small, well-worn rosary in her purse that her grandmother had given her. Tom carried a prayer card of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in his wallet. Their friendship, solidified by academic success and spiritual kinship, quickly became the most important thing in their lives. They were each other's first call for good news and bad. Tom was there when Susan struggled with family troubles back home, his quiet presence a rock of support. Susan was there to pull Tom out of his shell, dragging him to social events where he'd eventually relax and enjoy himself, always because she was by his side. The transition from best friends to something more was as natural as breathing. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. They were studying in the common room, and a comfortable silence had fallen between them. Tom looked up from his book and simply watched her, her brow furrowed in concentration as she highlighted a passage. He felt a surge of emotion so powerful it stole his breath. "Susan," he said, his voice soft. She looked up. I think. I'm in love with you." There was no drama, no grand gesture, just a profound truth hanging in the air. Susan smiled, a slow, beautiful smile that reached her eyes. "It's about time you noticed," she whispered. "I've been in love with you for months." From that day on, they were inseparable. Their love was a quiet, steady flame. Their dates were walks in the park, visits to different churches in the city, and volunteering at the local soup kitchen. They prayed together every night, whether in person or over the phone, always ending with a Hail Mary, asking for guidance and protection. They were a team, bound by love and faith, certain that their future was meant to be shared. Years passed in a blissful blur. Graduation led to jobs in the same city. They found a small apartment together, a cozy space that quickly filled with shared memories, photos from trips, books on shared shelves, a small altar in the corner with a statue of Mary they'd bought together. Life was simple, happy, and predictable. They talked about marriage often, but it was always a someday thing. They were so secure in their love that there seemed no rush. Then the crisis came. It was a Tuesday when Susan's company announced a major restructuring. Her department was being downsized, and the operations were being moved to a new branch in Texas. The employees were given a brutal choice: relocate to Texas or accept a severance package. Panic set in. The job market in their city was bleak. Tom had a stable, good-paying engineering job that he couldn't just leave. For a week, their home, once a sanctuary, was filled with anxious conversations that went in circles. "We can't do long distance, Tom. I've seen it fail so many times," Susan said, her voice trembling one evening. Tom took her hands. "We aren't like other couples, Susan. Our foundation is different. It's built on more than just convenience. It's built on faith. We can do this." After much prayer and many difficult discussions, they devised a plan. Susan would move to Texas for the job. It was a fantastic opportunity for her career. They would meet every single weekend, taking turns traveling. It would be expensive and exhausting, but it was temporary. They were sure they could weather it. The day Susan left was one of the hardest of their lives. Tom helped her pack her car, his throat tight with emotion. He slipped a new, silver rosary into her glove compartment. "For protection," he said, his voice thick, "and to remember that Mary is with you, even when I can't be." Susan hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "It's only for a little while. I love you, Tom, so much." The first 3 months were challenging but beautiful. They became masters of the weekend trip. Tom would fly to Texas, or Susan would fly back home. Their reunions were joyous, their time together intense and precious. They explored Texas together, finding new churches to visit, their faith a constant thread connecting them. They'd call each other every night, and without fail, they would end the call with a prayer. Their love felt not only intact, but fortified by the effort they were putting in. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the rhythm began to falter. It started with a text message on a Friday morning. "Susan, I'm so sorry, Tom. This project is a nightmare. My boss needs me to stay this weekend to finish the reports. I can't come home." Tom was disappointed, but understanding. "It's okay, honey. Work comes first. We'll see each other next weekend." But next weekend became the following weekend. The excuses started to become fluffy, vague. "Susan, I'm just so exhausted, the flight would wipe me out. Let's just have a video call weekend." "Susan, some of the girls from the office are going out for a birthday. I should really go to network." The once-a-week meetings became once every 2 weeks, then once a month. Tom felt the distance growing, not just in miles, but in the tone of their conversations. Susan's voice on the phone sounded distant, preoccupied. When he asked if everything was okay, she would quickly reassure him. "It's just work, Tom. I'm just tired. I love you." Tom, loyal to his core, his faith in Susan unshakable, buried his unease. He prayed harder. He lit candles for her at church. He believed this was just a difficult phase, a test of their endurance. He had no idea that the test was far more sinister than he could ever imagine. The reason for Susan's distance had a name: Frenzo. He was a new hire at the Texas office, charismatic, charming, and dangerously smooth. He worked in the sales department, and from the moment he saw Susan, he set his sights on her. He represented everything Tom was not: flashy, overtly confident, full of grand stories and promises. He started small, inviting her out for coffee with a group of colleagues. Then it was lunches. He listened to her talk about her life back home, about Tom, and he subtly began to plant seeds of doubt. "Long distance is so hard," he'd say, shaking his head sympathetically. "It must be lonely for you here. A woman like you deserves to have someone present, someone who can give you the world." At first, Susan brushed it off, but the loneliness of her new life was a constant ache. Tom's voice on the phone was a comfort, but it couldn't fill the empty apartment at night. Frenzo's attention was immediate, tangible. He made her feel seen and exciting. He represented a new, glamorous life in Texas, a stark contrast to the quiet, predictable future she had with Tom. Frenzo spun an elaborate web of lies. He told Susan he came from old money, that he was a millionaire, that he owned a portfolio of properties, a collection of fast cars, even a yacht. He painted a picture of a life of effortless luxury. To Susan, who was stressed and overworked, it sounded like a fairy tale. He was a fantasy, and she was slowly getting lost in it. The moral compass that had always guided her, the faith she shared with Tom, began to blur. She stopped calling Tom every night. She stopped suggesting they pray together. Guilt gnawed at her, but she silenced it with the thrilling excitement of her secret new connection. One evening, Frenzo kissed her after driving her home from a dinner. Susan, feeling confused and swept up, didn't pull away. That was the point of no return. The lies to Tom became more frequent, more elaborate. She told herself she was just confused, that she needed to figure things out. But in reality, she was having an affair. Frenzo, seeing his conquest nearly complete, proposed a plan. "Why are we waiting?" he said one night. "What you have with that guy back home is a habit, not a passion. Marry me. Let's start our life together. For real." Susan, intoxicated by the idea, by the escape from her guilt and the complexity of her old life, agreed. They decided to get married in a quick, quiet ceremony in Texas. She planned to call Tom afterward to end things cleanly, cowardly believing a phone call would be easier than facing him. She convinced herself that this was her new destiny. But Frenzo was a predator, and his goal was not marriage. It was conquest. The office holiday party was the setting for his final, monstrous act. The room was buzzing with music and laughter. Frenzo stayed by Susan's side all night, playing the doting partner. He brought her drinks, making sure her glass was never empty. What Susan didn't know was that in one of those drinks, he had mixed a powerful sedative. As the night wore on, she began to feel dizzy, her speech slurring. She stumbled, and Frenzo was right there to catch her. "You're not feeling well, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Let me get you home." She was in no state to protest. He half-carried, half-walked her to his car, and drove her not to her apartment, but to his. The world was a spinning, nauseating blur for Susan. The last thing she remembered was the cold leather of his sofa against her cheek. When she woke up hours later, she was in a strange bed. Her head pounded with a vicious headache, and she was naked. The events of the previous night came back in fragmented, horrifying flashes. The drink, the dizziness, Frenzo's face. She scrambled out of bed, wrapping herself in a sheet, just as Frenzo walked into the room, fully dressed, a cold, smug expression on his face. What happened?" Susan stammered, tears already welling in her eyes. Frenzo laughed, a short, cruel sound. "What do you think happened? You had a little too much fun, and I brought you home. Don't worry, you got what you wanted, and I got what I wanted." The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had been violated, used. The man she thought she was going to marry was a monster. "Get out," he said, his voice flat and dismissive. "My desire is fulfilled. I have no more use for you." The sheer brutality of his words shattered her. She dressed with trembling hands, humiliation and terror washing over her in waves. She stumbled out of his house and into a taxi, sobbing uncontrollably. The fairy tale had dissolved into the worst nightmare imaginable. Back in her own apartment, Susan collapsed. For 2 days, she didn't go to work. She didn't answer calls. She lay in bed, paralyzed by shame and despair. How could she have been so blind? How could she have betrayed Tom, her faith, everything she was, for a lie? She felt unclean, broken beyond repair. It was on the second day, as she sat huddled on her couch, wrapped in a blanket and staring blankly at the wall, that a knock came at her door. She ignored it. The knock came again, more insistent. Then a familiar voice. "Susan? It's me. Tom. I thought I'd surprise you." Her heart stopped. Tom. The one person she longed for, and the one person she could never face. With trembling legs, she opened the door. Tom stood there, holding a bouquet of her favorite flowers and a wide, excited grin. But the grin vanished the second he saw her. Her eyes were swollen and red, her face pale, her whole body shaking. "Susan? My God, what's wrong?" He dropped the flowers and rushed to her, pulling her into his arms. That simple, loving gesture broke her completely. The dam holding back her guilt and pain burst. She crumpled against him, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Between ragged breaths, the whole sordid story tumbled out. The loneliness, Frenzo's attention, the lies, the promises, the party, the drug, the rape. She held nothing back, confessing everything, waiting for him to push her away in disgust. Tom listened. As she spoke, his face went from concern to confusion, to a pain so profound it seemed to physically age him. When she finished, he slowly sank to his knees right there in her doorway, as if the weight of her words had crushed him to the ground. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a devastation that was unbearable to witness. "Why, Susan?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why did you do this? We had everything. We had God. We had Mary. We had each other. Why wasn't I enough?" Susan had no answer. She could only cry, repeating, I'm so sorry, Tom." Suddenly, a wave of nausea overwhelmed her. She rushed to the bathroom and vomited. It had been happening all morning. Tom was by her side in an instant, his own heartbreak momentarily set aside by concern for her. He held her hair back, his touch gentle despite his pain. "This isn't just stress," he said, his voice steadying with a new, grim purpose. "We're going to the hospital." At the emergency room, after a series of tests, a doctor came into the room with a clipboard. "Well, Susan," the doctor said kindly, "the nausea is understandable. It's a very common symptom in the first trimester. Congratulations, you're about 6 weeks pregnant." The word congratulations hung in the air like a poison. The world tilted on its axis. Pregnant. The consequence of Frenzo's violence was growing inside her. This was the final, cruel blow. Tom's face was a mask of stunned silence. The betrayal was one thing. This was another level of tragedy. They drove to Frenzo's house in a silent daze. Susan, fueled by a desperate fury, marched to his door and pounded on it. When he opened it, looking annoyed, she spat out the news. "I'm pregnant. It's yours. You have to take responsibility for what you did." Frenzo looked from her tear-streaked face to Tom's stony one. And then he laughed. It was a cold, mocking sound. "Pregnant? And you think it's mine? Don't make me laugh. You probably don't even know who the father is. Now get off my property before I call the police." He slammed the door in their faces. The last flicker of hope in Susan's heart died. They were utterly alone with this impossible situation. Back at her apartment, the atmosphere was thick with despair. Susan paced the room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "There's only one way out of this, Tom," she said, her voice hollow. "I have to end it. I can't have this baby. I can't have a constant reminder of him, of what I did, of what he did." She expected him to agree. She expected him to want to erase every trace of this nightmare. But Tom was quiet for a long time. He walked to the window, looking out at the city. He thought of their life together, their faith, the prayers they had shared. He thought of the innocent life just beginning. Finally, he turned to her, his eyes clear and resolute. "No, Susan." "What?" she asked, shocked. "No," he repeated, his voice firm but gentle. "We are not doing that. This child, this baby is innocent. What happened was evil, but this life is not. This is God's gift, a gift that we don't understand, a gift that comes from a place of darkness, but a gift nonetheless." Susan stared at him, unable to comprehend his words. "A gift? Tom, this is a curse. This is a monster's child." "It is a child," Tom said, walking towards her and taking her hands. "And it needs love. We will raise this baby. We will love it as if it were our own. Because in God's eyes, it will be. Susan, let me do this. Let me love you through this. Let's trust in God's plan, even when we can't see it. Marry me, not because you have to, but because I love you and I believe our story isn't over." It was the most profound act of love and forgiveness Susan could ever imagine. In the face of her ultimate betrayal, Tom offered not condemnation, but redemption. He saw a path forward where she only saw ruin. Moved beyond words, she nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Tom. Yes." They decided to return to their hometown. Tom would transfer his job. They would start over. They would get married and prepare for the baby. For a few days, A fragile peace settled over them. Tom's faith was so strong it seemed to be enough for both of them. But as the days passed, the darkness in Susan's mind began to whisper again. The trauma of the rape, the crushing guilt over her betrayal, the fear of looking at a child that might remind her of Frenzo every day, it all became too much. Tom's faith was a lighthouse, but she was lost in a storm too violent to see its beam. Secretly, she began to research abortion clinics. She convinced herself it was the only way to free Tom from this burden, to free herself from the constant reminder of her sin. She made an appointment. The night before, she barely slept. Tom, sensing her turmoil, held her close and prayed, but she felt miles away. The next morning, she told Tom she was going to the store. Instead, she drove towards a clinic. Her hands were clenched tightly on the steering wheel, her mind a battlefield of fear, guilt, and a desperate desire for the pain to stop. She pulled into the clinic parking lot and sat there, staring at the building, her heart pounding. This was it, the end of the nightmare, the beginning of a new, quiet guilt. As Susan's hand reached for the car door handle, a strange warmth filled the car. It was a physical warmth, but also a feeling of profound peace. The frantic, panicked voices in her head quieted. She looked up. There in the passenger seat, a figure began to materialize. It wasn't solid, but a being of pure, gentle light. But Susan knew instantly who it was. The serene face, the compassionate eyes, the blue mantle. It was Mother Mary. The air itself seemed to hum with a sacred energy. Terror and awe gripped Susan. She began to tremble. "My child," a voice said, not through her ears, but directly into her heart and mind. It was a voice of infinite love and authority. "Do not be afraid." Susan couldn't speak. She could only listen, tears of a different kind now streaming down her face, tears of reverence and overwhelming emotion. "You are thinking of a great sin," the vision of Mary continued. "You believe this child is a curse, a reminder of an evil man's actions. But you are wrong. Look into your heart." In that moment, Susan saw a flash of Tom's face when he had said, "This is God's gift." She felt the depth of his forgiveness. "This child is not Frenzo's." Mary's voice was clear as a bell. "It is a gift from heaven. It is my gift to Tom, through you." Susan gasped. The words reverberated through her very soul. "Tom's faith has been a beacon," Mary explained. "His prayers for you, for your safety, for your union, have risen like incense to the throne of God. In his divine mercy, and through my intercession, this life has been conceived. It is a child of love, not of violence. A child of forgiveness, not of sin. It is the instrument that will heal your heart and cement your bond forever. Do not destroy this miracle. Embrace it. This child is a blessing, and will be a blessing to many." As quickly as it had appeared, the vision began to fade. The light softened, but the immense feeling of peace remained, settling deep within Susan. "Trust in God's plan," were the final words that echoed in her spirit. Susan sat in the car for a long time, weeping tears of joy and relief. The weight of shame, the trauma, the guilt, it all lifted. She saw everything with a new, divine clarity. Tom's insistence on keeping the baby wasn't just loyalty, it was faith. Her pregnancy wasn't a punishment, it was a purpose. She started the car and drove not to the clinic, but back to her apartment. She ran inside, where Tom was anxiously waiting, sensing something was wrong. "Tom," she cried out, rushing into his arms. "Susan, what is it? What happened?" She looked up at him, her eyes shining with a light he hadn't seen in months. "I saw her, Tom. I saw Mother Mary." Tom held her, listening as she poured out the incredible story. She told him about the light, the voice, the message. "The baby isn't Frenzo's, Tom. Mary said it is her gift to you, a reward for your faith. Our baby is a miracle." Tom, a man of deep and simple faith, did not doubt her for a second. He held her close, tears of joy and gratitude flowing freely. It was the confirmation his heart had needed. Their love had been tested by fire, and heaven itself had intervened to save it. Susan and Tom were married a month later in their hometown church, right before the statue of Mary they had always prayed to. Their wedding was a celebration not just of love, but of forgiveness and divine grace. Susan's pregnancy was a time of healing and joy. When their daughter was born, they named her Maria, a permanent tribute to the miracle that had saved them. She was a happy, healthy child, and as she grew, it was clear to everyone that she had Tom's kind eyes and gentle spirit. They raised Maria with so much love, telling her the story of how much she was wanted, how she was a special gift from God. She bound their family together with a bond that was unbreakable. What looked like an ending became a new beginning. What felt like a betrayal became the doorway to a miracle. Friends, when you feel abandoned, when you're broken by life's circumstances, when you think you are beyond redemption, remember the story of Susan and Tom. Remember that God never leaves you, and that Mother Mary always intercedes for the faithful. Trust in the plan, even when you cannot see it. For sometimes, the greatest miracles are born from the deepest pain.